You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take.
Plan. I'm the enemy, because I like to think.
You can travel like a Bobby dog. You can hang out like a biker's mom. You fit in anywhere you go. Bring your own style just to steal the show. You shine it so well when I'm flowing your set. Drink with a loud, you drink your smoke on your bed. Loved by all yourself, you know. You're always involved, you're the star that show.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Fultonland Live. Hope you all are having a good week. I know that here in the States, we're coming up on a 4-day weekend for a lot of people. And I see some folks in the chat are going to enjoy that. Amanda B. and Derek Clay. Good to see you guys. Infinity Comics. Mr. Von Stugel. Good to see you, sir. Amanda says, today feels like Friday. I have no motivation.
On Friday?
I understand that absolutely. It's been a rough week around here. But we'll get into that in a couple of minutes. Good morning to Skip Edwards, who was the first one in the chat. Hope you're doing well, Skip. And where did it go? Infinity Comics, Alejandro.
Hello, Alejandro.
Hope you're doing well, sir. Hope you're having a good evening over there in the UK. Hanging out with Mr. Comic Book Black Belt himself, Russ Leach. How are you doing, Russ?
Yes. I'm still here. I've had 2 weeks back in the dojo and I feel fantastic.
Excellent.
So much happier training properly now. I'll get back outside train tomorrow evening, but I get the day off today because I've had 3 days on the trot training. So, yeah, good.
So as far as the lockdown status over there, are you, now that you're able to get back in the dojo, do you have to stick to pads? Are you allowed to spar with people, or what's it like?
Unfortunately, we're still not allowed to contact spar. So it's just pads and basics and kata at the moment. But it'll come. Hopefully, I think 21st of July, 21st of June is supposed to be the day when they get rid of, all the silliness. So hopefully I can hit someone then. That'd be great.
Yeah, cool. It's over here. It's supposed to be June 15th. Now, granted, this is coming from a governor who has changed the quote-unquote the day several times, so we'll see what happens, but he's facing a recall election.
I heard that, a lot of people want him gone, don't they? So
they had to get 1 million signatures in order to get the bureaucratic process rolling, and with all of the questions, shall we say, regarding elections in the U.S. over the last 6 months or so, the people who were leading the recall effort decided instead of 1 million signatures, they'd go ahead and get 2 million. And sure enough, it was good for them that they did, because something like 400,000 of those signatures they were told were invalid, despite the fact that they gathered them all in person with witnesses present. So,
they still got more than they needed. So good stuff. Maybe there is some democracy somewhere.
I tell you what, man. For all the well-deserved criticism that the United States gets for being a bunch of fat, spoiled people, you push us around enough, and once we start pushing back, it's almost like everybody else in the neighborhood realizes, oh yeah, we are Americans, and then they join in and they push back
Yeah,
as well.
I have that sense over here as well, but I
Yeah.
think people are waiting. I think they're still a little dormant. Mind you, saying that, Brexit happened, so
Yeah.
that was a thing.
Yeah.
And considering the EU's recent actions, there are very few people that are calling for us to go back. So yeah, very funny, very funny.
George Travalos is saying, "Who you calling spoiled? Not you, George. Definitely not you. Good morning. Glad you could join the show."
Nice to see you, George.
So I was chatting with Russ a little bit before the show started, and before we were talking Outliers business stuff, and I was telling him how originally for today's show I had something planned out, and I'm still going to try and make it happen for next week. I don't want to announce. I had a guest that I was going to try to bring in, multiple guests actually, but due to some things happening in life outside of Outlier Comics business, I wasn't able to get things together. So we're going to try that for next week, and once I can get the guest confirmed, then I'll go ahead and announce it. But it's. I think it's a show that people will enjoy. I'll put it that way. But anyway, so I had some other ideas for what we could do today, and the stuff that was going on in the comic book industry and entertainment in general, things kept happening. So every time I thought, oh well, maybe we'll cover that on Thursday's show, something else would come up, and it was one of those things where things in my own life were just, they got hectic and stayed that way, and it seemed like things in entertainment were getting really hectic as well. And I thought, what what are we going to talk about? Because every time I think I've got a topic, something else comes up that seems even more absurd, and I wonder if we should cover that. But anyway, to kind of sum it all up, as I was telling Russ, I woke up this morning and I was checking some messages, and
Da-da-da-da-da.
and it just seemed like the one common thread through all of this nonsense going on in various entertainment industries was that there's a group of people, consumers, you could say, whether it's comic book readers or film watchers or video game players, whatever, the consumers of the entertainment, whatever it happens to be with each specific person. The thing I kept seeing over and over again was they wanted authentic entertainment, and oftentimes we're not getting it. And I wanted to look into that a little bit and see if other people were seeing the same thing or if it was just me. And sure enough, it seemed like others were keying in on that as well. And one of the things that came up, Russ, was the Eternals trailer from Marvel for their Eternals film. Did you get a chance to check that out?
No.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
well.
I have zero interest in it. That's the problem is, and I think we may touch on this later on. I've got zero interest for all of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's left me behind. I just
Now, how is it that a lifelong Marvel fan, up until recent years, such as yourself, is it fair to say that you had been a Marvel fan for 40 years or more?
I think it's got to be. I'm still a Marvel fan as far as
The
I'm a
classic
fan.
stuff?
I'm a fan of the Marvel that I grew up with.
Same
You
here.
know, I still love that stuff. And if they were to have a change of heart tomorrow, I'd draw anything they asked me to draw. But in their current guise, in the way that they approach their work, I don't think I'm a fit for them at all. I don't think I fit in the way that I see my professionalism, the way that I see my approach to the comic page. Even I can't see that I'm really a fit for them. So that's not a thing. I did really enjoy the MCU up until the last film. I said earlier to someone, I think a lot of studios get a hard time about some of the content they put on to film when they have source material. They can't get it right. They can't get it right for the fans. They can't get it right for the general public. And it's not always their fault. But I think a perfect example of getting it right would be Lord of the Rings, because Jackson went, and the whole production team went with the whole concept of just getting it right. Somebody was asking about shouldn't directors be fans of the work that they're doing? And to my mind, no, you're a professional. You don't have to be a fan. I don't have to be a fan of a particular character for someone to say to me, draw this on a comic book page, and me put my best into it. I don't need to be okay. I need to respect the character. I need to respect the intellectual property. I need to respect the story and respect the reader, but I don't need to be a fan. And I don't know if Jackson was a fan. I would imagine he probably was. But he, as far as he was concerned, as far as the production team were concerned, they were laying out Tolkien's ideas, his not just what he'd written on the page, but the way he approached storytelling, and the fact that it was sort of like a new mythology for England. That was what it was. That's the whole point. In the same way that Marvel Comics, in a lot of ways, was a new mythology for the United States. And I think you can't always get that right when you come to a cinema, when you come to put your ideas on film, when you come to putting that brand on film. And the MCU for me was much like I don't know, Batman. That Nolan's Batman. It wasn't the Batman from the comics. It wasn't the MCU. The Marvel comics. It wasn't those characters. It was a facsimile of those characters. And they did it well enough. I mean, I sat there with my mouth open during Civil War, Spider-Man, Captain America. I loved it. Great. This is brilliant. And I enjoyed it for what it was. It wasn't 616. It wasn't the characters I grew up with. It was a facsimile of them that I could see on the screen and enjoy. They did Thanos particularly well. They did a whole bunch of stuff well. But just seeing kind of what's been coming out over the past 2 years, since 3 years, is it, since Endgame? I don't know, 2 years. It's just, none of it's interested me. It felt like that was a natural conclusion. That was it. That was the end of it. And I didn't need to see any more. And nothing else has really given me any inspiration to go back and look. Somebody was saying today about the Doctor Strange movie, the new one. That might be quite good. Yeah, it might be. I think as much as I'm capable quite easily of separating the comics and the films and saying, yeah, that's one thing and that's another, and I really don't mind. The way that the comics have been handled in the last 5 years has actually soured my opinion of a lot of things Marvel. And then in general, when you look at the broad face of the industry, of the entertainment industry in general, the fact that it's easy to pick on people who don't like your work. I don't like that film. Well, you must be an ist or a phobe or a bigot or whatever it is because you don't like it. Okay, because you're not gulping down the rubbish that we're feeding you. And so that in itself brings you to a point where you stop caring. You're not interested anymore because much like what you're saying as well is about it being what was the word you were using? Not valid,
Authentic.
authentic. It's not authentic because it's not authentic. It's not authentic entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
It's propaganda in a lot of ways, dressed up as entertainment. Okay, with a whole bunch of stuff, rubbed into it. It's the same with the way that people write. Again, people would make this argument about there's always been politics in comics. Yes, there has. The difference is that politics was written with the idea that the reader could make their own mind up, not be told what they should think. That's ideology. Two separate things.
That whatever politics were in there were subservient to the story, the larger story that was being told. It's exactly. It's not like that political message was the story.
Exactly. So it becomes a propaganda pamphlet at the end of the day. Instead of giving people ideas, giving people, give people ideas about diversity, give people ideas about different cultures, different people, the way that different people think, the attitudes, religion, culture, whatever it is, science, whatever it is, give those things to the reader, let them make their own mind up, not just slam them in the face and say, you must think of it in this way. And that's why, and that's not authentic either, because it's not authentic entertainment. Entertainment is about letting you, and it can be serious. You can watch a film about, about a terrible crime or about a terrible thing that's happened in the past. And it can be dramatized so that you can, the whole point of dramatizing events like that is to connect with the viewer or the reader or whatever, media it is. And in some way inspire them to think about these things. To think for themselves, not to be told what to think, not to be told what to accept. And so if you lack authenticity, you lack the ability to make your viewer, your reader, your whatever it might be, you lack the ability to entice them into thinking for themselves. And that's where it goes. And then because a lot of people, some people can't think for themselves. That's the way of the world. Not everybody's the same. But a large portion of any audience will be able to think for themselves. And if they're not being encouraged to do that, then they become bored and they lose interest because they're not being pushed. They're just being spoon fed.
Yeah. It reminds me of late night talk shows where in previous eras, you had someone like Johnny Carson, who really, his goal was to entertain the audience, the live studio audience, and then the TV audience, that would be watching what was essentially a recording of his live show. And that was his goal. And if he or his guest, if he didn't think that they were entertaining the audience, then he took it upon himself to do a better job and try to change that around immediately. And I think of some of the late night talk show hosts of the current era in the US and how their job doesn't seem to be entertaining an audience. It seems to be that they want to, put these political messages out there, expecting you to give them, applause for it. And if you don't, then they just kind of look at the audience like, hey, wait a minute, you're supposed to clap. Why aren't you clapping?
We've got the same thing with comedy over here. I mean, especially in the BBC, the last few years, it's just turned into say Trump's name and everyone laughs, or say the Conservatives are evil and everyone laughs. It's like, no, that's not funny. That might be your opinion. You're perfectly welcome to your opinion, whatever. But it doesn't make it funny. And it's just this sycophantic. It's like a short circuit. It's like feeding into each other. So you have these people like come out. You're talking about these presenters come out and just shovel ideology. Everyone's an activist now. You can't just have pure entertainment. There has to be a message. But it's like, no, there doesn't have to be a message. In fact, the most useful messages, just as I was saying earlier, are those you don't necessarily know are there.
Well,
They're the
and
ones that make you think.
yeah, exactly. And I think also that there's been a sustained effort by people who control entertainment mediums for a long enough period of time now that I think the average person who isn't, let's say, a hardcore fan of that particular product, they're just a casual consumer of the product, whether it's a film or a TV show or a comic book or video game, whatever. I think that they have been exposed to this inauthentic. It's almost like these so-called entertainers are putting on a play, but instead of providing the entertainment that the audience is expecting, they're going through the motions of doing something else, which is, not entertaining. And so I think that the average casual consumer of entertainment these days, regardless of the medium, has keyed in on that and has said, well, if you're not going to give me the entertainment that I've been experiencing for however many decades, then I'm not interested and I don't want what you're selling. I'm not going to buy it. Yeah. So I'm going to turn away from it. And it's not as though people are going to simply give up finding what entertains them. They're going to look elsewhere, which explains, the massive boom in the comics, independent comic book sector. But it also explains how there are more independent filmmakers and more independent game developers. Yeah. And I just see entertainment in general, regardless of which industry you're in, I see the consumers of that entertainment having turned to independent providers of entertainment over the last several years. I see the number, it not only has increased each year, but I think the rate of increase is also going up each year.
What you've got is this sort of feedback loop between activist journalists, activist presenters, activist pseudo entertainers, between them and their ever shrinking audience, and the feedback loop will inevitably get smaller and smaller as the audience reduces, because the ordinary people don't want to hear that. They want to be entertained. Yeah. People who aren't on a mission, they're just trying to have their life and enjoy a bit of it while they can. They just want entertainment. They don't want to be lectured to. They don't, again, there's nothing wrong with putting any ideas into stories and entertainment. Just do it in a way where you give the viewer or the reader, the consumer, a chance to make their own ideas up. To have their own ideas and to critically view what they're consuming. And so this feedback loop is it can't conserve the energy. It will get smaller and smaller, and people are looking elsewhere for their entertainment. It's as simple as that.
I highlighted a couple of comments from the chat from a couple of guys who are, I see, passionate about trying to provide an authenticity in the comics that they're producing. And they also both happen to be animators, Jose Garcia and Ryan Cardinal. I've got Ryan's first book, Caius, on my shelf. And with Jose, he's been doing these live streams lately where he's, drawing, and he's also providing useful information for people wanting to learn how to draw, kind of explaining what he's doing. But he also talks about what he's done in the past with animation, what he's done with the comics he's created in the past. And both of those guys are good examples of people who have a real passion for what they're doing and how they're doing it independently. And that's an authenticity that you can't fake. And it comes across in the work.
Yeah, it does. And Lord Crackhead has got it absolutely right. You've got this. Well, I've said this before, but who would have thought that new technology was not going to be moving panels or panels with sound on them or panels in some form on any kind of tablet or animated panels or 3D panels. No, the
Mhm.
new technology was going to be the communication aspect
Yeah.
of things like social media, and more importantly, things like YouTube, where creators could actually directly connect with people that consumed their work,
Yeah.
and they could, much like you do when you go to conventions. But when you go to the conventions, how many people are you going to see? Even at a big convention, you're only going to see tens of people personally,
Right.
eye to eye contact, if
Right.
that. In fact, if that. Most people are just like browsing past and don't talk to you and what have you. With
Yeah.
something like this, you're completely open to everybody. They can see the whites of your eyes. They can see whether you're lying or not, or whether you talk straight to them, and
Mhm.
they get an idea. But not just on one video, on multiple streams where you're constantly coming back again and again, and they can make that relationship with you,
Yeah.
and they can start understanding where you're coming from, and it helps. I mean, at the end of the day, if you put out a crap book, it doesn't matter how good you are on the stream. People
Mhm.
are gonna find you out in the end. So that's where the authenticity comes in. Is that you're an authentic creator person. You want to connect with these people, connect with the audience, but at the same time, you do want to create a quality product because
Yeah.
of the passion that you have for the product. And I've said this before in the past. I'm sure there's plenty of people in mainstream comics who are very passionate, but the passion doesn't come from the top down. Not
Right.
anymore. It doesn't
Right.
come from the top down, and so you're losing that authenticity without a doubt. And that's why people are coming over to indie comics in general, but
Yeah.
definitely crowdfunding comics as well in their swathes,
Well, and
because they're
I've lost.
finding authentic stuff.
Yeah, I've lost count of how many creators from corporate publishers who have left the corporate scene, or they just didn't get their contracts renewed, or they were laid off. There's a variety of reasons, but they decide to finally pursue that dream of creating their own book, or creators who have done their own stuff in addition to their corporate gigs, but they've decided that they're done with the corporate work and they're going to try and only do creator owned stuff from then on out. And one of the reasons that gets cited over and over, and I think this really speaks to what you just said about there are creators there who still do have this authenticity that is evident when you talk to them, where they really do want to entertain the reader, and they are very disappointed in all of those layers of bureaucracy and the obstacles that get put in between them and their reader, whether it's from editorial, whether it's from marketing, whether it's from the way that distribution is set up. And so a lot of times those creators will, they will almost in a sense of desperation turn to creator owned work for a variety of reasons. But one of them I have discovered in recent years is that they really want to get back to that sense of authentic connection between them and the reader
Well,
that they used to have at one time. Or maybe
yeah,
they're a newer creator and that's what they always imagined it would be, but then they got into
it
the
isn't.
business.
Yeah.
Like I know of a particular Marvel, I'm not going to name who it is. I don't know if they'd be okay with me saying this publicly, but I know of a particular Marvel creator who got in, basically was doing their dream job, and then they haven't said this in so many words publicly, but it's my personal belief, purely speculative, that they just found out that, the corporate Marvel way of doing things was nothing like, or very little like, what they imagined it to be.
Yeah.
And that creator is now working for Marvel Studios on the movie side of the business. I'm sure making far more money
Yeah.
and probably dealing with a lot less headache.
Yeah.
But it's debatable.
There's different kinds of headaches.
Yeah, yeah,
I would say she is probably dealing with just as many headaches. It's just they're getting paid a hell of a lot more for it. so it makes it easier to deal with.
It becomes more tolerable
it
when
becomes
you're
more
making
tolerable. Yeah,
all of that money. Your bills are
Yeah.
paid. You can actually save up for the future. And
and it's not, it isn't always about how passionate you are about comics. Sometimes just finances get in the way. I was passionate about comics. I've always been passionate about comics. But, and I didn't get, I kind of missed out on that mid part of my mid section of my career. My peers are those that are in the comic book industry have been doing it for a lot longer than me, simply because I missed out on that opportunity mid 90s and went off and paid a mortgage. And at the time, especially later on in the 90s, it was the right thing to do.
Yeah,
I ended up doing exactly the right thing. I went away and got my job in where all the creative industry that I was in, and I got well paid for what I was doing, and I came back to it. I came back because I have a passion for it.
Yeah, I did the same exact thing.
So it is about, as like I say, as much as I'm giving people the benefit of the doubt, yes, you've got to feed your kids and all the rest of it. That's the most important thing.
Right.
Making sure your family's okay and that you do have a good life. Quality of life is the most important thing. But comics really do come down to a passion, and you can tell when people are passionate about it. In the way that they talk about comics, the comics that they produce, just everything about it. And when people aren't as passionate, but they're being, used, and I think a lot of creators are used by larger corporate comics.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It's not all what it's. You can't blame the creators per se. That it's a it's a symbiotic relationship, but they are being used. There's just and there's a lot of people on their way through. I mean, maybe they started off even saying, "Oh yeah, I just want to draw comics," and then they get there and go, "No, actually, there isn't the money in this. I'm going to go and I want to go and do storyboarding, or I want my IP to get to, Netflix or whatever it is." But they're not there for the comics. Whether they started off as not there, or whether they just found out it was not the holy grail they thought it was, they're not there for it. And that is the difference, because everybody who's in indie is there for the comics. They're there for the comics. I'm sure there are a few people that are just looking for that Netflix deal, but they ain't going to get very far.
Right.
The people that are going to be in it, and the people are still going to be in it in 5 years' time, God willing, apart from any major problems, if you're still making comics, if that's still your primary thing, if you can still be there, if you're still making enough money to turn over to be there as part of that independent industry, we'll be here. I'm going to be in 5 years' time, unless something happens to me. I'll be here in 5 years' time. You'll be in 5 years' time. Lots of people we know will be here in 5 years' time, but there'll be plenty of people who turn up, who want to do comics, say they're passionate about it. They don't last the course.
Right. Well, and Ryan Cardinal here says, when you're part of the corporate machine of entertainment, you are an expendable and replaceable cog.
Yeah. Everybody is expendable. Everybody.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is anytime you're a part of a corporate machine, regardless of the industry, that's exactly what you are. You're an asset, or you're a liability. And if you're an asset, then if you work for a good corporation, in the sense that they're profitable and they want to attract the best talent they can, then they'll reward you for the things you bring to their company that make you an asset to them. If you're a liability, most of the time they'll get rid of you, because
I've been both.
Yeah, I was an asset for a major. It was a multi-billion-dollar multinational corporation for a decade, and then after new executive leadership took over and started running the company into the ground, it was determined that I was a liability, and I got laid off. So I was actually happy about that. But again, that really, it is, in a weird way, it comes back to the original topic of conversation as far as authenticity, because it was an example of the founding leadership of that corporation, had a real authentic vision for the company, and they dealt with people in an authentic way, and they built a corporate culture where people actually wanted to work there. And then they retired and new leadership came in, and they were very inauthentic, and it was obvious to see. And because they were at the top of that corporation, that same attitude ended up over the years gradually filtering all the way down.
Yeah,
And
it happens. Yeah,
and like you were saying with Marvel, you were saying earlier in the conversation that inauthentic quality is starting at the very top, and then it's working its way all the way down, and then it shows up in the finished product.
Yeah,
and
it does. Yeah.
Despite the best intentions of some
people on the
creators
ground,
there, who still are they do see themselves as authentic storytellers and entertainers, and they're doing their best work under very difficult circumstances.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
And so you can still find, I personally walked away from Marvel Comics in 2018 and from DC Comics in 2019, and I haven't looked back, and I haven't missed it. I still enjoy the classic stuff. I'm still buying, collections of old material and enjoying it every bit as much as I did in the 80s and in the early 90s. But, I certainly don't begrudge anybody who can still find modern day corporate comics that they like. I mean, on the contrary, I'm happy for them. I wish I was in that position. I'd like to be able to say that I was still, a fan of these companies that I grew up with, and that I spent, I don't know how much money on their products over the decades. But, it's one of those things where I think that you've got someone like Kevin Feige, who's head of Marvel Studios, and he's been the chief creative officer for Marvel Comics for about a year and a half now. And recently he was he went on record as saying two things I thought were very interesting. One was that the characters that Marvel Studios is showcasing these days, they make their decisions not based on the popularity of the character. They make their decisions based on other reasons. And we look at movies like Shang-Chi and the Eternals, which we've recently seen trailers for. Well, most of us have. People like Russ aren't interested and aren't watching, but some of us have watched the trailers. But anyway, and in the marketing, both in the trailers and in print media and online, they've gone to a whole lot of trouble to talk about things like representation and diversity and inclusion and all of these other things without focusing on what is the authentic, supposed to be entertaining core of this movie. What is the real story here?
Well, that's the feedback loop I was talking about. It's a virtue signaling feedback loop where people say, come see our film because it's got black people and female people and people that maybe have different things going on in bed. And they and the woke crowd or the virtue signaling crowd go, oh, this is wonderful, yes. And then it feeds back the loop, and they think, well, that's really good because we got Twitter to say they really liked it. So and some corporation has just decided they're going to back us. So yeah, let's do it again. And then it comes out, and it only makes $500 million because it's always going to make multi hundreds of millions of dollars simply because of the fact that it just turns up and not everybody's watching. Like there's a lot of people, not normies, will just turn up and go, oh yeah, it's a Marvel movie, let's go and have a look. So it's a Wednesday night, it's our film night, let's watch that. So it's always going to make an amount of money. So the whole idea that you can say, oh, it made 750 million, it must be a success, is pretty disingenuous, to be honest. Because there's always going to be a large percentage of people who just turn up and watch whatever's on at the cinema. But yeah, you've got that kind of that virtue signaling feedback loop going on, and then the next film they make, it'll all be about the immutable characteristics of the actors that are playing these characters. And if those characters aren't exactly what they want in immutable characteristics, they'll change them.
Yeah.
Just so that it suits their virtue signaling, instead of actually thinking, well, why don't we make some characters? And if some of them are gay and some of them look this way and some of them look that way, does it matter? As long as they're great characters.
Right.
I mean, yeah, I think there is there is weight to be lent to seeing different people on screen, to seeing different people in books, to having different characters. But there's also an argument that says, you know, you don't have to put different races of humans into Lord of the Rings, for instance.
Right.
It was a mythology that was made for England. Okay, and I'm not saying there aren't any black people in England. Of course they are. And they're just as English as I am. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about. This is supposed to be from like way back. Okay, like in the depths of, you know, maybe the Hyborian age, like Conan was prehistory, you know, like that kind of thing. And there's a reason why most people are white in Norway, you know, like because it's really cold. Okay, it's like there's genetics involved and there's geography and there's evolution. There's all kinds of shit going on. All right, but there's no harm in having that on screen and saying you don't have to fill that. In the same way, there's no harm in having I don't know a film that has just got black characters in. Yeah. Okay, because it works for that story. Absolutely brilliant. Go for it. Do it. Yeah, that's great. But it doesn't mean that you should just say you have to have this array of boxes ticked every time you make a piece of entertainment. Because then what happens is it just becomes homogenous and you just don't see anything. You don't learn anything. You don't get anything from it. It is not authentic. Well, because authentic diversity is people mixing, things mixing, everybody, diversity of thought, diversity of ideas, diversity of people, all kinds of stuff, and mixing randomly. Yeah. Randomly mixing without a bias. That's diversity.
Okay? Yeah, it's it's interesting how they have been going, some of these corporate entertainment executives have been going so hard after that. I guess what they thought was the woke dollar, that it's really starting to bite them in very public ways, where you've got, I mentioned Kevin Feige earlier, and there's recently, a couple days ago, I saw articles circulating about how he was talking about how in Doctor Strange.
You just need to clarify that statement is about CMYK color ranges and nothing else. Okay.
For people who might be listening and not watching, Mo Big says, unless Bancroft is the director, then he may decide black characters are difficult to see in the film, so he'll recast based on that. We were having a conversation on Mike Bancroft's show last night where he was talking about having to do some color adjustments in the digital files, and in comics, you've got what they call a 4-color process, CMYK. It's essentially blues and reds and yellows, and then you have
cyan, magenta, yellow, black.
Right,
so
exactly.
You can knock back the black or knock back the cyan or magenta or yellow, whatever it is. You can decide on those ranges. And obviously, it was making whatever he'd seen was muddy. It was making it too dark that you couldn't see what was going on. So you had to lighten up the black part
the
of it,
the levels, the percentage
on
the
a K,
color mix,
on a K, yeah. But
so and it's funny because Feige got interviewed recently where he was saying how with the first Doctor Strange movie, instead of casting the Ancient One as being this ancient Chinese man, like he was portrayed in the Marvel comic universe. Well, I guess
wasn't that supposed to be because he was supposed to be from the Himalayas or something?
Yeah, well, yeah, he was.
And there's an issue with China.
He was Tibetan,
Tibetan,
right?
that's it. Tibetan, yeah.
He was from the Himalayas, and Feige in this interview is talking about how they didn't want to essentially. He didn't say they didn't want to be accused of racial stereotyping, but that was the gist of what he said. I mean, basically, he was saying how they didn't want to mistakenly, fall into stereotyping, blah, 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 blah. So they decided to cast against type and go with, Tilda Swinton, a very pale English woman, to play the Ancient One. And then there was this real backlash in from the Chinese market, not to mention just the fans of, the character and the titles that the Ancient One appeared in, like Doctor Strange or other titles. And so they got roasted for having, this very pale English lady playing a character who's supposed to be a Tibetan man.
Eric's absolutely right. You can just imagine the production meeting on that. It's like, what are we going to do about this character? We can't do this because it's in China. They're going to eat us alive. I know. Let's make it a woman. You can just imagine the tick boxes.
Well, yeah. And Feige could have come out and said, he could have just been honest and said, yeah, because of, cultural considerations with, China and Tibet and that whole situation, we decided to avoid what we thought might be a potential problem. So we cast, a very good actor, but yeah, she's an English lady, not an Asian man. And in hindsight, it looks like that was a mistake. Well, instead of saying something like that, no, what he said was, it was because they didn't want to, appear as though they were falling into a racial stereotype. But he says now, because they're getting roasted for it, now with the Shang-Chi casting and all this stuff, now he's like, but we understand that we could have cast an Asian man, blah, 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 blah. So he's making it all about identity politics instead of actually just telling the truth and saying, look, we made a business decision because we didn't want to offend the Chinese power brokers that let us in or keep us out of the Chinese film market.
There's nothing wrong with making a business decision like that. But you see that none of them are straight talking. They won't say it straight. They're much like politicians, all of them. They won't tell you straight. They have to, rock around the idea. They'll never tell you exactly what's going on.
Well, Aaron McIntyre has a great answer to that. He says, instead of a Tibetan monk, they could have made him a Shaolin monk. Most people probably would not have picked up on that.
No,
yeah, they wouldn't. Shaolin being Chinese.
Yeah, exactly. They could have done that, and then they'd have made everybody happy, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Except, of course, the chances are that they thought, no, we'll just upset the CCCP, and by the way, let's just make a woman. Because we can't we can't have the top dog being a man.
Right.
You can just see the mental gymnastics that they go through. These people, they all seem to be completely mad. They can't just make stories and let people just enjoy them. That they're always checking themselves for their own guilt or their own virtue signaling or whatever it might be, that they feel that the rest of the world must think like they do, instead of just giving people the opportunity to think for themselves.
Yeah, I was thinking yesterday, as I was working on the Outliers, chapter 2, and for everybody in the chat, chapter 1 is completely penciled, and a little bit later in the show, we're going to show you guys the first inked page of the book. And I was doing some work on chapter 2, and I was thinking how ironic it was that I started out, when I was building the Outliers universe, I started out with ideas for powers and power sets and things I thought would be interesting, and trying to put an original spin on certain powers or power sets that have been done over and over and over without much originality. And so I when it came to creating the characters, I thought of just starting with powers and abilities and then building out from there. And in the Outliers universe, there is a genetic component to who gets powers and who doesn't, and how strong their powers are versus not. And I included that one because I hadn't seen it done before in the way that it's done in the Outliers universe. There's no mutant gene or anything like that, for people who might be wondering. But then I was also thinking how it just naturally gave organic storytelling choices for including all kinds of people from all over the world, all different skin color, all different appearances and sizes and shapes and blah 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 blah. And it just all of a sudden you've got this storytelling element which gives you that so-called diversity and inclusion that they're always on and on and on about, without sacrificing the quality of the storytelling. And so I was thinking about how in chapter 2 we've got this clash of superpowered people, and I was just thinking about how diverse and representational this book is, and will continue to be. But it wasn't out of any sort of cynical or inauthentic reasoning. It wasn't out of any virtue signaling. It just happened to be one of those things that came out of the natural foundations of the storytelling process when creating this universe.
Exactly. I fart a little.
Yeah, Pedro says, whenever I hear diversity and inclusion, I fart a little.
That's funny.
Eric McIntyre says, every time I hear Dalai Lama, I think of Surf Ninjas when the Dalai Lama is singing Barbara Ann.
Oh, dear.
Pedro says, Disney loves that commie buck.
Yum, yum.
Hey, Oliver from 656 Comics is here. Good to see you. So yeah, I mean, I was so anyway, as a result of these Kevin Feige interviews, and I was just thinking about the inauthenticity of saying things like they made the change to the Ancient One due to, like social considerations, blah blah blah, and it had nothing to do with it. Come to find out, it was they didn't want to have a Tibetan character in their film because they believed that the CCP would have locked him out of China, and I'm sure they were right.
When you know for a fact that if they're sitting there and they're going, okay, well, who should we have on for that ninja part? And they go, oh, well, yeah, a woman. Okay, a woman Oriental. Mm-hmm. If I'm allowed to say that word, Asian. I don't know what is the correct word, but you know for a fact that they're thinking in that exact way that they're accusing other people of thinking.
Yes.
And I'm surprised that I haven't been done for cultural appropriation for calling myself a comic book black belt. What are you going to do?
How dare you not? How dare you not refer to yourself as an African American belt?
I think exactly. Or the fact that I actually train in a Japanese Okinawan style. Like up yours. It's like you haven't got it's this constant soft bigotry. Mm-hmm. It's constant. It's like calling everybody else out for the things that they're thinking inside.
There was a student here in the U.S., an immigrant from South Africa. This was, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. And they were trying to get into an Ivy League school, and there was this. I don't know if it was a scandal exactly, but what happened is that they, and I don't remember which, it was an Ivy League university, I know that much. But anyway, so they get this full ride scholarship to attend this Ivy League university in the States. And they get there, and they're talking to a person in the admissions office who is getting really flustered. And it turns out that the problem is that I don't know if it was that the student had dual citizenship and called themselves an African American, or it was just that they called themselves African. But anyway, it turns out this African is as white as you and me, and they were born and raised in Africa.
And that makes them African, doesn't it?
And that makes them African. And the admissions person is just totally flustered because here's a student who's just as white as a grain of rice, and you know it's because but you said African, so we thought that meant black.
That doesn't compute.
And now I'm going to get in trouble because I gave a full ride scholarship to a white person. Pedro says Elon Musk is African. Yeah, just the other day it was pointed out that some woke mobsters were going crazy because Elon Musk is the richest African American in the world. He's got dual citizenship, it turns out, in South Africa and America.
Oh dear.
So he's African American, and he's just as white as you and I.
Stuff like that makes you giggle, doesn't it? That's stupid.
Oh yeah, so Ultraman Schneily is saying, yeah, she was from South Africa. Talking about that student. So yeah, I mean, and Pedro, just like you were saying, Russ, that soft bigotry of these expectations that they have. Exactly. Pedro says, yeah, the people at the university, they were waiting for thick lips, big beads, and drums. That's what they themselves have these stereotypes locked into their minds, and they project that out. And then when someone shows up that fulfills all of the requirements from an academic perspective, but doesn't fit in with their their own prejudice that they have in their mind, then suddenly they've got a problem.
Yeah. I think, in all fairness, that we've discussed this for a while, and it is a common theme because obviously there's lots of ordinary, normal people who don't quite understand what the hell's going on. Yeah. Culture is what was it? Politics is downwind from pop culture.
Yeah, politics is downstream from culture.
And it's all coming out now. It's starting to reach normies, the people that aren't involved, with the entertainment industry like we are, or aren't involved with deep into education and all that kind of stuff. Normal, ordinary people are going, whoa, back the truck up. What's going on?
Yeah.
And I think it's a good thing because now it's all coming out and things are starting to change. I do feel the winds have changed. There's no doubt about it. You can feel it over here. Certain things are happening and people are starting to wake up. And more importantly, institutions are starting to turn. Mm-hmm. I know it's only small, but we had one institution here like fire the guy that was at the top because he was talking about decolonizing and it and all the rest of it, and he got ousted out. It's just like, have enough of this. You're here to look after buildings and parks and stuff like that, and
right.
And just look after it. Don't you shouldn't be here with an agenda other than doing your job. Well, and I think that's the problem all over. Is like, you shouldn't be here with an agenda. You should be doing your job. If you're a journalist, you shouldn't have an agenda.
Right.
You should be searching for the truth.
Yeah.
That's what you should be searching for.
And as entertainers, people should be trying their very best to entertain their audience. And so that's like, you and I mean, we're working on the Outliers. It's a superhero comic book, graphic novel series that is got the best elements as we see it from 70s and 80s comic book storytelling. We're putting it together using modern tools and techniques, but we don't have the worst elements of modern comic book storytelling in there. So it's the best of both worlds. Now, you and I have interests outside of making comics, but we're not going to take those and force them into this comic book story.
Exactly.
It
would be like having on the third page of this a knockback scene to one of the characters doing a whole session in a dojo,
right,
for 10 pages.
Right.
It's like, no, I might enjoy drawing that. I don't know. I doubt I would. But it's like, that's not what it's about. It's about the story that we're trying to tell.
So, and I think that what you said earlier about the technological revolution in entertainment, and for comics specifically, did not produce, let's say, panels with moving characters, or pages where the audio is spoken off of the page or anything like that. Really, the technical or technological revolution has been to allow creators and readers to see each other face to face.
It's been a communication.
It's a communications revolution. And so that's one of the things that made me think about the topic of authenticity today, because since readers and creators can talk to each other, and for the most part, it's, readers, for the creators who do get on YouTube or Twitch or Periscope or whatever, the pattern of behavior that the creator shows is going to let the readers decide for themselves. Is this person being authentic with me? If so, do I like their personality? Do I not like it? And then, depending on what the answer is there, they can take that information and then apply it to, well, I think I might like the book, but I don't really like that creator, so I'll put those two together and figure out whether or not I want to buy it. Or the opposite, where, well, the comic's not really my cup of tea, but I really like that creator and I want to help be a part of their success, so I am going to buy it. So all of that calculus can be done where the reader feels like they're getting good information. They're getting information that is valuable to them. And I think it's really that authenticity that shows up when creators are interacting, as we try and do with our chat here on our show, as we try and do through social media like Twitter. Some people use Facebook, or whatever it is. The key there is that readers and potential readers get the chance to see the creator, what they're about, and fit that together with the type of storytelling that they're trying to produce.
It is a brand thing as well. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, I didn't just put my name together and my logo and what have you randomly. There's got to be a portion of recognition there. It is a two-way street. We are in a business. I think that's something else, is that people appreciate the authenticity of you saying, I'm in a business.
Right.
I'm not here to be a charity. All right, me babbers. I'm not here to be a charity. I'm not here to just give and give and give. No. But at the same time, if people are prepared to pay money to buy my book, if they're prepared to sit and even just subscribe to my channel, then I owe them that professionalism. I owe them that debt of his decent content, his quality work, and that's authentic in its own right. So yeah, I think I think just being authentic in so many different ways. It's not just about what you put on the page. What Tommy was saying there about about the baseball scenes, absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, that wasn't quite what I was getting at. What I was trying to say is if I had a passion that was that was part of my life. So, for instance, for me, it was karate, but say it was football, or say it was politics, or say it was an ideology. I wouldn't want to just slam a big section of that into my comic book because that was what made me tick. You know, I'm telling you a story for entertainment value. Now, I have some opinions on, let's be very lightweight about this, about spirituality. I'm not a religious man, but I am a spiritual man. Okay. And I have some opinions on the way creation works. Okay. And I've spun some of that into the ideas for my book, Only Death Can Save Us. Okay. But it's in there because I wanted to communicate some of those ideas. But at the same time, it's left up to the reader to decide whether they want to take that in, or if they want to think about it, or if they need it as part of the story. Because the story's written on multiple levels where you can just look at it as a big punch up between, you know, a superhero and a bad guy. Okay. If that's what you want to get out of it, and you love the, you know, you love just like lots of action, you're a Michael Bay approach to comic books, and I have that approach in a lot of ways. Yeah, fine, big explosions, punch ups, great. But if you want to look a bit deeper and think about why I've written the story in the way that I have, it's there, but it's not punched at you. It's not put in your face. It's not an ideology taking over the entertainment. It's in there, and you can take it or leave it.
Yeah.
And that's the way they should be written. That's the way all entertainment should be done. Yeah,
I mean, one of the things, you know, Tommy was talking about the X-Men earlier and the baseball scenes. And the thought occurred to me that one of the things that Chris Claremont during his run, I mean, the guy loves to travel, and he loves to try to absorb a little bit of local culture whenever he goes, you know, somewhere new. And you would see that in his writing. He would put in, he would take the X-Men to different locales and like make a point of including some bit of architecture or some, you know, historical significance of that bridge, or, you know, or whatever it might be. It's not like that was the whole comic. It was just a little bit sprinkled in here and there to help try to add a sense of realism to this wild.
But not just that, to open the minds and the eyes of the readers.
Yeah. I mean, so if you wanted to,
even the stuff that we were reading when I was a kid, like, it had a great vocabulary in it. I had to go and look words up. It was opening my mind.
Right. Yeah, no, I would do the same thing. If I was reading a comic or if I was reading a novel and there was something in there I didn't understand, I would go look it up. Yeah. And then I would, as a kid, I would feel like, oh, I'm reading, you know, teenager stuff, or I'm reading grown-up stuff. And as a kid, when you're growing up, you know, you always
look up the level.
I don't know a kid that I can think of who is really happy being the age they are.
No,
you know,
it was the next thing.
You always want to be older than what you are, and then you get old and you wish you were younger. but anyway,
I wish I was more supple. That's for sure.
It's one of those things where I think that the authenticity of indie creators, whether it's in comics or film or TV or whatever, I think that, as you say, the normie crowd has picked up on the fact that their entertainment has been taken over by sociopolitical ideologues, and they're finding that it's not entertaining anymore.
Yeah, it's
maybe they found that it hasn't been entertaining for a few years, but they were just hanging on, figuring it would change and go back to the way it was. Or
again, there's a lot of just turning up on film night,
right?
And turning up and just wandering in and watching it and eating your popcorn and not thinking much about it.
And I think that it's the authenticity and passion of independent creators that is. I think that the average consumer is starting to consider independently produced stuff for the first time, maybe.
Yeah.
Because the stuff that is in the mainstream of whatever entertainment industry they were a part of subscribing to, it has so turned them off that it's almost like it's not that they're being forced to consider the independent stuff for the first time, but it's more like, well, I'm so dissatisfied with the stuff that I always consumed. I'm now motivated to look for something
Yeah,
else.
yeah,
And by
yeah.
virtue of the fact that that stuff over there is the mainstream, the only other place to look for is in the indies. Now, for us, it happens to be comics. I grew up reading mainstream, Marvel and DC stuff and a little bit of Image when they came out in the early 90s. But for the most part, it was Marvel all through my adolescent years. And then as a teen, I started getting into DC. But I was never really interested in the indie stuff. And for the most part, as an adult, I would pick up an indie book here and there, but it was mostly Marvel and DC for me because I didn't have a reason to look elsewhere. I liked
Yeah.
what they were producing. It was
I
only
think-
when they started producing so many things I didn't like that I was finally motivated to look elsewhere, and behold, there was indie comic book entertainment.
I think there's corporate indies and there's indies.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Image is not an indie. Even when they first started out, okay, the comic that you got was tangibly no different to the comic you got from Marvel.
Yeah,
it was still, and they were backed up by huge fame from the comic book industry and by just the direct market. That the direct market made Image.
Yeah, for sure.
In the same way that the newsstand made Marvel and DC, and that's the way that worked for them. But
the direct market and Wizard Magazine,
but
made
real indies,
Image.
real independent comics. Okay, so for instance, you got to be looking at TMNT and stuff like that. That were the success stories. Real independent comics never got the publicity that those guys got. They never got that. And of course, there has been a stigma around it for a long time. That stigma's going away because you're seeing an incredible enhancement in technology as far as printing is concerned and deliverables, even digital comics.
Yeah.
Sorry. but there is an advancement in the deliverables there, and so you're seeing books turn up that are truly independent books that are again indistinguishable from quality graphic novels that you see on bookshelves in Barnes and Noble or whatever. So that's the things. Things are radically changing. There really is this. There's another golden age coming, or we're in the midst of it at the moment. I think we're at the start of it now.
I think we're at the start of it. Yeah,
and it's not just about the content. It's about the quality of the books themselves. Literally, the physical quality of those books. You're going to be seeing a lot more quality product in the indie market than you've ever seen before. And we've already seen, I think, a lot of quality product, but it's getting to the point now where the audiences are shifting, and what they're going to see is they're going to see this sea of quality product instead of some stapled together stuff and some badly printed stuff and stuff that doesn't come out on time. They're actually going to come to an indie market that is full of professionals, that's full of people that are providing quality work.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I've got on my shelves behind me, I have a range of quality in both storytelling content and the form factor, the actual covers and pages and ink quality and all of that stuff. I've got a range of stuff that I've bought over the last few years, and I can take the stuff that I consider to be the best production quality, and I can walk into a bookstore and I can find stuff in there that's selling now that has lower production quality than the indie book that I would be holding in my hand.
And because as indie creators we're agile, we can move with trends, we can do things. And if I had to change up my style in order to sell stuff, I could. But my ears are burning. There's some badly put together stuff and some stuff that doesn't come out on time.
So he thinks you might be implying that AR orangutan
No,
is
not at all.
badly
No,
put together,
no.
not coming out on time.
Although I am still waiting for my book from Michael Bancroft. But
yeah, Mike,
but,
take that.
yeah, Mike, come on, where's my book?
Although I am happy to say that our printer proofs are on the way.
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
looking forward to seeing it. I have to say, I'm very looking forward to seeing it. But yeah, it's like that. There's quality stuff out there. It's not the chaos that indie comics used to be. Okay, and indie comics have gone through several waves in their own way, where they've become very big and people have taken notice of them. But this time round, the technologies have changed.
Yes.
And the communication networks have changed. And it means that you're going to get a different quality, a different standard of product than you got before.
It's not the old days of somebody sitting in their garage and hand stapling the pages that they went down to the local office supply store and replicated on their copy machine. Now you can't. There are some people who still do that because that's how they want to do it. They love the idea of underground comics, and that is what they want to do. And more power to them. I mean, if that's what floats your boat, then absolutely do that.
The only way to get the normies is to give them the product that they think looks like the products that the mainstream were giving them, as far as quality of print, as far as the way they're presented. And that's where the markets are. Make no doubt, that's where the big markets are. The normie market, where you want to start a trend. At some point, you need to start a trend where normies, start going to Kickstarter or start going to Indiegogo or whatever, or some kind of hybrid version of that I think probably is in the works. Somebody somewhere will be doing it after seeing what's been going on. I'm sure it's in the works. A market where people can go for that kind of product, and it'll be a trend, and suddenly you'll find people going there in their thousands, in their hundreds of thousands. But it requires that thing to happen for it to really take off. But we're in an environment where things are coming together that can happen. It's not pie in the sky. It's being built.
We're building it. Yeah. The image that comes to my mind is that of, the guy out in the woods who's going to build himself a log cabin, and he's got nothing but an axe. It can be done, but it takes a lot of time, a lot of hard work, and the one who has a strategic plan that's based on real world information, experience learned through the trials and errors of others. That's the guy who's most likely to succeed building that cabin with nothing but an axe. And quite frankly, there's a few of us, or more than a few of us, who have been around for the last several years, paying very close attention to what customers want and what has not been working in the past for comics. And we are actively partnering with customers to build an entirely new marketplace with, new means of production, new means of distribution, new means of marketing. We're partnered with our customers, and we're inventing the new market that is going to be I guess you would call it the cornerstone of this new golden age of comics that we're seeing kind of happen right before our eyes.
Yeah, without doubt. Just wanted to go back quickly. Ultraman
Schneily.
Yeah, said I will back a book based on how much I like what the creator has to say. That's why I backed Only Earth Can Save Us. Thank you, Ultraman. Thank you. Hopefully you like the book as well. As well as my inane ramblings. But yeah, we're on the precipice of something big, I think.
Well, speaking of being on the precipice of something big, how about if you bring up that first inked page of the Outliers?
Giggity.
And while you're looking for that, Mo Big says, I have a backup plan if for some reason ARO and my other series don't take off. I'm going to pitch it to Image. Quote, love and non-binary rockets. Unquote. And then he says, thoughts? And George says, boo. And Mo rightly says, don't be a bigot, George.
Don't be a bigot, George. Oh, George. Don't be a bigot.
Oh. So here it is, ladies and gentlemen. The first inked page of the Outliers. Russ, do you want to talk about the process?
Yeah, it was pretty straightforward. It's digital pencils, blue line, print that out onto 180 GSM Bristol board, and then ink up. I got some pens. I got loads of pens, brush pens, and then scan that in. It hasn't been balanced yet, so you can still see the inks. So the blacks haven't been balanced. But,
yeah. So sorry, Russ, if I could just interject real quick. For people who are not familiar with the terminology, if you see original artwork, you can see things like brush strokes and pen strokes or quills, like where it will scratch into the paper. As you can see on our buddy Dennis's hair here, you can see some of the blacks look a little darker than others, and that's due to the brush and the ink going over itself over and over. So what in the production process, what we do is, as Russ said, balancing the inks, where he'll go in and take a sample of, let's say, the boot or the hair, and then apply that evenly across the area of that image.
Yeah. So something else I would do as well. So, for instance, I've done a couple of tiny amends. So you do the ink, then get it scanned in, and there might be a couple of minor changes. I didn't quite get the line I liked on this speed line here, so I redid that digitally. I mean, it's in the same place. It's just a slightly smoother line, which I preferred for it. And there might be a couple of tiny other places, but basically it's done. And I think in some ways, if you manage to, if it is something you do and you buy the original art, it's there's something quite cool about the fact that it's got something that maybe didn't quite make it into press, even if it's only tiny little bits.
Yeah, absolutely.
It makes it that more unique.
I love being able to take an original art page that I own and put it up against the comic book and then look at the two side by side.
Yeah.
So, as Russ said, the book is penciled digitally and then inked traditionally. So, when we do the campaign, the original art pages will be offered for sale. And I was mentioning on Mike Bancroft's show last night that I realized after I had outlined the whole second chapter of the book that I hadn't allowed for backers to get drawn in. And that is something I have wanted to do for the campaign. So I took out the entire middle of the story and reworked it. And it took me a couple of weeks. I was telling Russ behind the scenes. I mean, I was beating my head against the wall trying to make this work, because I would start into it thinking I had a way to do it, but each time it felt like it wasn't reading with the flow that the story should naturally have. It felt like I was just forcing events just so we could have backers get drawn in. And I was committed to the idea of working it out so that, yes, backers can get drawn in, but yes, it also feels like a natural story flow, and it doesn't seem like anybody is out of place or being forced in there in any way. So I finally figured out a way to do it and finished up they'll put the finishing touches on that yesterday, earlier in the day. I still have to do a little bit of fine tuning before I can give an actual count of how many backers can get drawn in. But I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 to 10.
First I heard of it.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't. There are several times, Russ, where I told you I've got it, but no, I had to go back and rework
I've
it.
got to draw people's faces into it. What? Who said when did that happen?
But but we're making it work. We really want to make backers happy. So if that means extra work for me, if that means that Russ is going to have to draw likenesses on characters, then so be it. And quite frankly, Russ, one of the reasons why I recruited you is because I had seen your work in the Doctor Who magazines, and I'd seen the way you'd captured likenesses. And that was going to be one of my requirements, because I knew from the very beginning that I wanted backers to be able to, see themselves on the page.
I can do that. I can do that. There you go. So that's the blue line on it. That last thing you saw was a page from Only Death.
Cool.
A bit Kirby.
Yeah. So you're gonna do these single issue floppies.
Yeah.
That you'll break down the Only Death Can Save Us book 1 story, and it will be published as
three comics.
Three comics.
There's going to be some backup stuff in there, which everybody will get in the second book. There is also a backup story that is not being published in those comics, which will only be available in color in the second book as well. So there's some exclusive content in there, as apart from all the other bits and pieces. But Rick and I have been expanding the universe, so it's all gone a bit Kirby, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely.
So and what I'm trying to do, obviously, if I just stop that there. From my perspective, I'm trying to grow my own brand, as it were. I want to be doing things that other artists aren't necessarily doing. I can cross-hatch with the best of them if I want to.
Yeah.
But that's not what I'm after. I'm after doing something. Obviously, the reason that I'm here with you and why we continue to work together is because we're both lovers of Bronze Age stuff.
Yep.
So that's obviously where a lot of the focus is on my work. But it's also, other people aren't doing that.
Right.
I don't see a lot of that kind of art style, to be honest.
And we've seen a high demand for it.
I think there is.
That is the main thing for me, why I went down the road to creating the Outliers universe, is because I saw such a high demand for it, but I didn't see it being produced anywhere. So
it seems that people love the idea of it not being too cartoony.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if it's too realistic, it becomes stilted.
Yeah, well, because then you
want to
where's the fantasy escapism? That's part of the fun of those comics. In the Bronze Age, they did such a good job of mixing serious and fun.
Exactly, they mixed it in a certain way. Marvel, for me, nailed it. Just the way that look.
Yep.
That's the good stuff. Just the way that they could, the artists of that time had a real ability. Did you know what I mean? They were technicians, they were draftsmen, draftswomen, draftsmen, whatever. They really pulled out the stops to create great work, and they did it again and again and again. It was their job. They did it. They did it well. But at the same time, there was so much heart in it, so much emotion and drama and gravitas to their drawing, and that's what I want to bring. That's all I'm about. You know, I've done stints trying to draw in a certain way, and this is where I'm comfortable. And it just so happens that it's also a way that a lot of people don't draw. Like, so you know, I'm happy to fill that gap, as it were. Draft people, yes, often chilly in the corner. No, drafts people are people that play drafts. Get it right, bro.
Yeah, just like birthing capable people.
Birthing capable people.
Those not women. No, birthing capable people.
People with a birth canal. That I think.
There you go. Yeah. Well, everyone, that does it for our show today. Thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. We've got, endless choices as to how we spend our time, and the fact that you guys choose to spend it with us is something we're very grateful for. And so I would just like to say that next week we are going to try to have at least one special guest, possibly more. We'll see how the week goes. But, at the end of the day, like I've said several times, it's just a conversation between Russ and I until the chat shows up. And you guys make this a show. So
it really is. It's, look at that. Publishing Pete is in here. No, it is. It's great interaction. Just being able to chat with people, knowing that they're interested in what you have to say it's one of the sources of life, isn't it? Just that communication. That's why we tell stories.
Yep.
That's why we tell stories, because we want to communicate, not tell, not dictate, but authentically communicate.
Yep. All right, everybody. Thanks again. Let's go out and make a great day.
That's Vidania.
Bye.